So today I'm talking about books in the music classroom. If you've been following me for a while, you know that I have a bunch of book posts on my blog, and I run and operate the Ultimate Music Ed Booklist.com, which is a Google Sheet with well over 4,000 books on it that you can use in a music classroom. And it's great. Yeah, you got all these books. What do you do with them? So we're going to talk about that today a little bit. So the first way you can use books in the music classroom is books with a musical hook. Now, these are the ones that are really obvious. They are folk songs that are illustrated. They're about a song. Somebody took lyrics to like a pop song and have illustrated it beautifully. They really have like an obvious tie. They are essentially music but illustrated. That's kind of that first one, and that's sort of like the easiest, most obvious of the examples. Next is biographies of musicians. Another obvious one. There's tons and tons of biographies for composers and musicians out now, and we're getting more and more, and they're like more and more diverse representation in them, which is lovely and exciting. So these are great ways to tie a listening lesson together, perhaps introduce a composer or a musician that your students are new to. And I love that. It's just such an authentic way to let students learn about one of these people. Next are books that teach a concept. And it's a small collection, but it is a growing collection of books that have been written by mostly music educators that are very obvious, like this is about composing, this is about fast and slow, this is about the notes on the staff. Vicki Weber comes to mind. Obviously, she's got some really good books that teach concepts. Laszlo Learns Recorder. So there's definitely some growing resources in that area, and that's awesome. You also see a lot of ones like about instruments, particularly the orchestra. We see a lot of books about the orchestra, but there are ones you can find about more diverse representation of instruments, which I like. In fact, I'm going to show you one really quickly that I just discovered. I actually ordered it from the University of Guam Press. It's the only place I could find it online. And if you are a culture bearer and I am saying this incorrectly, please tell me. So, I Lailai I Bilembao Tuyan. And that very long word basically means belly instrument, and this is the instrument, and it's about this girl, Lailai, learning to play it, and it's a beautiful, lovely book. Actually, I have a blog post about it in a couple weeks that you might want to check out. But this is a great one, and we're seeing more and more diverse representation in books about instruments, so that's wonderful. And if you are an author who's writing stuff like that, please do more. There's other books I've seen that have more representation about instruments around the world, and it includes Western classical, but also instruments from everywhere else, which they're presented in a lovely way that it doesn't make it feel like, well, here's the Western classical, and then here's everything else. So I like that. Next is books for creation. And these are books that don't necessarily teach anything musical, but they feel musical. They might have a great sound story, a lot of onomatopoeia behind them. They might be something that you can envision a program behind, like taking this lovely story and inserting songs into it and making it feel very musical, or more musical than it already is. They're just very artful, beautiful books that deserve a way of being even more creative in your class, and that's because your students might love it, you might love it and want to share the story, and that's a nice way to include literature that doesn't necessarily immediately look like, hey, this is musical, but in reality it can be musical. the next one is, and you can make full programs out of these sometimes. And the last real big one is books that tie a lesson together. Now, these are books that don't feel musical. They don't have an obvious musical example, but they are still, like, they have a place in your classroom, and you know they have a place there. So for instance, if you are working with, first graders, and you've been singing a bunch of bee songs and playing Bee Bee Bumblebee and things like that, you can read a book. Buzzy the Bumblebee is one of my favorites. I know I've talked about it before, but tie the lesson together at the end of the day with a book about a bee. Or perhaps it's a book that represents a culture you've been studying, you've been talking about the instruments, you've been listening to it, and you're like, hey, let's learn a little bit about this culture today, and oh, hey, here's a story that features a child from that culture. Those are nice ways to add a book to your class that doesn't necessarily have that immediate, hey, this is musical, but it's still, you still want it in your classroom, and there's a valid place for those. So I hope this has given you some ideas on using books in the music classroom. As always, thank you so much for watching this. If you've not checked out the ultimatemusicedbooklist.com, I really urge you to go there. And it is chock full of ideas, and there's lots of different columns sort of notating different ways to use these books. It is free. It will always remain free. And as always, thank you so much. If you liked this video, I'd love it if you gave it a little like or hit subscribe and share it with your friends. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you later.